Mike is recording it, and
Right.
I'll be recording it as well.
Probably have to click that first.
Okay, good. Looks like we're in business here. And I guess it's up to you now, Mike. Let's get you add the spotlight, and there you are.
Okay, well, like to welcome everybody tonight, and I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha program, and we have of course a special guest tonight, Al Beatty, and he's going to tie the Humpy in a easy version and a very easy version. And if I told you Al wrote the book on Humpies, he actually did. He has a Humpy encyclopedia. And if you go out to his website, btsflyfishing.com, and look over on the left-hand side, it shows all their books. And there's a link to get a copy of the Humpy encyclopedia for free. It's got a wealth of information. I really appreciate you making that free, because I'd pay money for that book anytime. So anyway,
Well, you
we're going
can,
to learn
Mike,
a lot. Pardon
you
me?
can, Mike, as a matter of fact. Yes, you can get a download copy, and it's a PDF copy. And if you want to print it out, you can. And the dirty secret about printers these days is it's going to cost you more for the ink to print the book than if you bought the book that we have at Amazon in the paper version. So you might want to consider it's available for free, but we also sell it.
Well, I've got the book on weaving flies as well, and I just can't quit staring at it, but I just can't. A lot of it's a little too difficult for me, so I'm having a little trouble getting the hang of it, but I'm watching the book all the time. Anyway, I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to Al, and I think we're all going to learn a little bit about Humpies tonight.
Okay, well, let's just start with the introduction. And yeah, we're with Project Healing Waters tonight. And you already knew that, but I'm Al Beatty anyway. And tonight, the co-pilot is Gretchen. She'll be taking care of all of the studio work while I try to tie a fly. But anyway, for now, what I'd like to do is verify with Mike that we're in focus on our different flies. So let me zoom in here, and let's just verify that.
It just went out of focus, and now it looks great.
Okay, and let's go to this one. And it's gonna go out of focus, and I'll bring it back.
Okay.
Whoops. Wrong one. I gotta go back and did the wrong camera. That doesn't work.
Right.
We probably
Okay,
should
that
have
one
did
looks
this.
good.
All right. Now let's
That
get
one looks good. You don't need to go out of focus, do you?
There.
that looks good to me. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Okay.
looks pretty good.
Good. All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the recipe. And I usually tell you that if you want the recipe, to grab your cell phone and take a picture, it'll be on your phone, and you can do that. But I keep learning about computers as I go along, and there's a key on most computers called print screen. And if you'll hit the print screen, that will take whatever's on screen right there and put it into memory, and then you can paste that into a paint program, Photoshop, or something similar, and you'll have it then as well. But anyway, as you can see, it's the recipe is kind of hodgepodge because it's actually representing stuff that we put into 3 flies. Pretty straightforward. I'll get into the materials right now, moving over to the materials area. And because I've got the potential of tying 3 flies, I have a disaster over here. It isn't a real supply of materials. It's just a disaster. So I'm going to start right here, start moving stuff over, hackle. Okay, it's brown hackle, and it's a size for the hook that I'll be tying tonight, which is a size 8. I'll be using a strip of foam rubber. There it is. It's going over to the vise as well. I've got a couple of pieces of poly yarn. I'm just going to set them off to the side right here. So one of the things you'll find about poly yarn is if you get any stray hair fibers or underfur, it likes to stick to that. So I'm going to leave that off to the side here so it doesn't make a mess. And we've got the static guard. We've already sprayed everything down with static, and I have floss and thread. And we have a surprise material, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. But for right now, let's move back to the vise. I'll set this out of here. And one of the things that I do is I set out several hooks so I don't have to fumble around trying to pick them up or get them out of a bag or anything. And I put them into hackle pliers. It just kind of helps me get squared away. Now we're going to take a look at a standard humpy. And if I get time, we'll tie a standard humpy. This is just a hair wing humpy. We've tied thousands of them for fly shops all over the country. And that's what it looks like. Now I want you to notice, now here is one of the really super easy ones we're going to tie tonight. And darn if it doesn't look pretty similar. Let's see, we'll put that guy there and that guy there. And you know what? The fish don't know the difference. And as a working guide, I didn't use the hair ones. I use these right here because that doggone poly yarn that we're going to be using for the fly never gets wet. It'll get soaked up a little bit, one back cast, and it's totally dried out. And then the last one we'll do is the other really easy guy, and it's a royal, kind of a royal humpy, and but it's got a foam back on it. And that's not in the book, but one similar to it is. Anyhow, we're going to start by getting our floss out. I want you to notice that I have my floss stored under a O-ring. That's so it doesn't come unthreaded. I can't tell you, and all the shows that Gretchen and I have traveled to over the years, something about getting on a plane makes all of your bobbins come unthreaded. Just drives you nuts. You get to a show and you got to thread everything. All right, now I am going to start with the poly humpy, and then with that fly, we start in the middle of the hook and wrap to the bend and back almost to the starting point. And when I say almost to the starting point, we want to talk about that. The humpy is a fly like a lot of flies. It will creep forward on the hook if given the chance. And how do you have your materials creep forward on the hook? Well, I want you to notice where I stopped that thread right there. I didn't quite go back to my starting point. And you're going to see why here in just a minute. I'm just going to leave that right there. And go over to the materials, and I'll get out my moose body here, and it's hidden back here under all this other junk that I've got. I'll just get that out. Pull it up, cut it off, and I'll just move over to the vise and clean out the underfur. All right. In fact, when I move my finger rapidly up and down through the butt ends while holding onto the very tips of the hair, it nurses the fuzz out of here out and the short fibers out rapidly. If I go one direction only, or if I just pull and try to stroke it out, I'm building up static electricity. And that's one of the reasons I use static guard, is to get rid of static electricity. You guys in Texas, where it's more humid than it is here in Idaho, you probably don't have to worry about static electricity, but it's a real pain in the neck in this part of the world. Well, I don't want to get dirt and crap all over my camera, so I'm going to move off camera for just a moment and over the waist bend. So I'll be right back. Okay, and now it's all cleaned out. And we'll get a hair stacker here. And my hair stacker is a homemade one. I've had this for 40 years, this one and 23 more just like it. And it's made out of a shotgun shell base, a 1/2-inch copper nipple, and a chapstick tube.
That's been with him longer than me.
Oh yeah, we've been together 40 plus years. Anyway, I've stacked my hair and I'm getting ready to tie on the tail.
Let me know when you have those on for sale on your website.
They won't be because they're also kind of a pain in the neck to make. And well, I just don't have ready access to the shotgun shell bases anymore. And you really need I find it easier anyway to make them out of the low base shells that you use for trap shooting and stuff like that. Now I'm going to measure the length of the tail so it's equal to the length of the hook shank. Move it right to the back of the hook. And I want you to notice that I'm dropping the hair down on my side of the hook so that I can take a loose loop around the hair. And as I tighten up and bring up the next turn, you see how that rolls right up on top? And I'm going to wrap now back towards the bend, binding this in place. And you remember when we first started, I talked about material creep. Well, I'm going to stop right there for the moment so we can show that. Would you give me a tight shot on that, Gretch? Yeah. I want you to see that leaving that little space there allows me to cut off the waist, and the bulk of the waist doesn't creep forward on the hook, causing a problem. You see, the waist ends right at that point where I wanted it to end. All right, now we're going to go into some use of poly yarn. And I want to show you something about poly yarn that I've combed this out so it's nice and fuzzy. The way it comes off of the skein is, I'll get this out right here, is you get little knots in the stuff. And you really need to work your way through the material. And when you come up to a knot, don't try to go clear behind the knot and pull all the way through. You're going to have to go through it in steps. And there we go. Okay, and that cleans it out pretty good. I'll just set that aside for the moment. We need to talk about another thing. This is a very easy fly to tie, but it's got one thing that's a little bit of a problem. When you're tying with hair will compress and collapse, and you can kind of cinch it into place. Poly yarn only goes down so far and it stops. It doesn't collapse anymore. So what I am going to do is show you a way to stagger your underbody application to make a smooth outer body. We're going to start by, I'm going to actually double this, but for right now, I'm just going to tie in the first part, and I'm just going to cut that even, tie it in place. Whoops, slipped off. There we go. All right, back up here. When things are going to heck, trim again. All right, there we go. Now, if I take and fold this over, because I want a double piece of this, and put it in the same identical spot, I want to show you something. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I have a really big cliff right there. Cut it out. And when I try to wrap down over that, my thread's going to slip. And that's also an area where I want my hackle and wings and everything to be. And what's going to happen is that cliff is just going to make it impossible to wrap hackle over it. So what we're going to do is build our underbody in a tapered application so that we don't have a cliff to deal with. So I want you to notice that I'm not putting it there. I'm moving back a little ways so that it's put on in 2 stages. Now, what I'm going to do is just wrap back to the very back of the hook. I'm having a hard time taking enough time on this fly to even, because it's just so doggone easy going together. Now I'm going to come down the front here, and the tapered underbody allows it to slope to the wing position, just like that. Now what we're going to do is pull that over, and it doesn't make any difference if you're tying a hair humpy or a poly humpy. There's one rule about forming the hump. I got a pretty firm and nice hump there. It's not quite as tight as it could be. The rule is whether you're forming the hump out of hair or yarn or anything, you can't pull it tight. You cannot pull it tight. You have to push it tight. Relax the thread, push right here, slide forward, tighten up. That one maneuver right there is the difference between a puffed up, poorly done. I'll tie one. It looks okay. It'll fish okay. It's going to snag in the fish's teeth pretty bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and put it back the way it should have been. I'll just take a couple of turns. I'm pulling it pretty tight right now, but I'm going to relax, press, tighten. And that right there is the difference between a nice tight humpy that looks like this one, and it doesn't make any difference if it's poly yarn or hair. The difference between a good hump on a humpy and a bad one is pushing the material into place, not pulling it. All right. Okay, right there. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to trim off some of this. I'm going to trim it long because I'm going to want to cut it a little bit later. But for right now, I just want to kind of get that cut off. And I'm going to switch now from floss to thread, because the floss is really nice for building up the body, but it's also going to build up too big of a head for me. So I'll just tie that on. I have the same color thread here. We'll just switch to that. Now, if I were tying a fly for my own fishing, I would not divide the wings, but I'm supposed to at least make an attempt to tie something that looks pretty much like the original. So I'll go ahead and divide the wings. But I would normally just leave them like that for my own fishing. Okay, let's just crisscross between, just as if we were tying with hair. Just like that. And now I'm going to take a couple of turns around the near side wing, called posting the wing. You don't really need to worry about it too much with the poly, but you really need to do it with the hair. And then I'll do the offside wing. Whoops. Now I'm just going to crisscross between them. Okay, and there we go. And we're getting close to where we need to be. Now I'm going to cut my wings to the length that I want them to be. One of the things that you don't want to do is if you pull up and then cut it to the length that you want it to be, I want you to notice, see how that springs back? If you cut it so it's the right length there, it's going to be about 3/4 the length it should be, because it springs back. It's got a lot of spring to it. So what you do is you just want the wing to be equal to the length of the hook shank. So here's another hook, and we'll just all right. Okay, that looks pretty good. And I'll get out a hackle. And tonight I'm going to probably show you a couple of ways to hackle any hair wing fly. Tonight, I'm just going to, I'm going to put on a heavily dressed hackle like we do for just about every hair wing fly or polywing fly that we fish in the Rocky Mountain West. It's pretty heavily hackled. Our friends from the East tend to hackle their flies a little bit, a little bit less, a little bit sparser than we do in the West. We claim it's because of our water conditions in the West being a lot rougher. And quite frankly, I don't believe that. I think they got some pretty tough water in the East as well. I want you to notice that I'm starting to wrap my hackle at the front of the fly because I'm going to actually make two passes of hackle. The first one goes from front to back, working my way back towards the wings. And right there at the wings, I don't want to cross under yet. I want to do one turn tight against the front of those wings. And now we'll come to the behind the wing. And another turn. And now I'm going to anchor that hackle in place and squiggle, if there is such a word. Anyway, squiggle my thread forward to the front. Is there such a word, Gretchen?
Of course.
Okay, I just made it up. That's
You
there.
said it, it's gotta be a word.
Therefore, it must be a word, right?
That's right.
Okay, good. Now we're just going to go ahead and finish wrapping the second hackle out of the first hackle. One of the neat things about Whiting Farms hackle and a lot of other genetic hackles that we have to work with today is we can tie several flies out of the same feather. And I remember tying these back in the 70s and early 80s when all we had was India hackle, and we were putting 5 and 6 feathers on every fly. It was just an absolute pain. And that's a whole another process there on how to get a good looking fly with 6 hackles. But anyway, what we're going to do now is I've anchored that in place. I'm going to wrap a thread head and a jam knot all at the same time. And we'll pull out my whip finish tool. And I knew there was something wrong. I didn't switch glasses. Let me grab my other glasses. Oh my God, everything looks so much better now. This is amazing. Now I can see what I'm doing.
You know how they make these glasses that have little knobs on the sides that are adjustable?
Yeah, the good thing, I would highly recommend that you buy a set and see what you think of them. Actually, I had a tip on Fly Tying Friday last week, and if you want to waste $50, go ahead and get them. I got a pair here that I'll send you for I'll send them to you for $30. I mean, it's a $20 off deal, and you'll be getting the short end of the stick on that. Anyway, back to our fly. Let's take a look at it.
I want to take a closer view of the front side.
Okay, looks good.
Turn it so it's sideways. Yeah. What I wanted to show was how there's no space there on the hackle.
Oh, let me rotate it this way.
Yeah, there you go. And that's because he's tied it front to back and
Yeah,
back to front.
and that fills in the gap. A lot of times there's a gap right here where I'm pointing with my scissors right now, under the wing, when you wrap the hackles from the same direction. And also, if you'll recall, I told you that I jammed the one tight against the front, in the front as I was wrapping from front to back, and that also fills in that gap. Otherwise, you have a little gap under there. Doesn't make any difference to anybody but the customer that's buying the fly. Anyway, any questions before we move on to one that's even a little bit easier?
That's a beautiful fly, Al.
I'll tell you what, fish is like a son of a gun. That's all I can tell you is they do really,
It's
really
almost like
great.
a loaded mosquito.
What size?
Al, Tom says he'd still be on the elk here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I've tied Tom Thumbs and Humpies for years, and I never really got the hang of the getting the back to be nice and tight like that. And it's kind of almost embarrassing to see that all you got to do is just give it that push, and that keeps
It's the
everything
one,
right up on top, and it doesn't get too
it's the one rule of any folded back hair or material application. Okay, bullet head's the same thing. You can't pull the hair tight on a bullet head, you have to push it. Well, it's so important that most everybody ties bullet heads with a bullet head tool where they kind of push it over. Well, think about what you're doing. You're not pulling the hair tight. All you do is pull the hair up and over and kind of get it lined up, and you use the bullet head tool to push it tight. And well, we don't have a tool that's going to fit on the hook like it would need to for a humpy. So you have to use your fingers to push it tight.
on the polywing Humpy and with the poly back. Do you notice any difference in flotation between hair and the poly when you're fishing them?
Absolutely. And it's one of the main reasons that I fished it with clients. Nothing against clients, but most of the time, anybody that's done some guiding knows that a good portion of the people that are taking down the river don't have as much experience as the guy that's running the boat, the guide. And so they will find a lot of different ways to drown the fly. And even one tied out of hair, tied out of the right kind of hair, they eventually get waterlogged. They just sink like a rock. These never sink because the denseness of the fiber will not soak up water. Water will get between the fibers, and that's why one back cast will dry out the fly. But it's a very light material, but it's dense. And that's one of the reasons we had to tie it on the fly the way we did, is because that density doesn't compress. It's not hollow like hair is. But that's also the good thing about it, but you need to know how to manipulate it.
Now, is it just a couple of false casts that dries that fly out, or have you ever used like the dry desiccant, like Frog's Fanny and some of the dry?
All of the above. And if I'm selling Frog's Fanny for the fly shop that I'm working for, then we use Frog's Fanny. But if we're just going down the river with Al to catch some fish, the back cast will do it just fine. I mean, you understand how business works here, guys. Come
Right.
on.
Do you always do the tails with moose? In the older books, it seemed like I think it was a Royal Humpy actually called for moose. Most of the rest of them called for deer or elk for the tail.
And that's a good question. And on my own flies, I do because it's a really great material, easy to do, and I got lots of it. I've got a couple of moose hides here, and I'm not going to run out. Getting good hair for hair wings is on a deer or an elk is basically a strip about a foot wide down the backbone, over the shoulders, over the rump. That's not the full hide. On the flip side, just about all of a moose hide, the density of the hair allows it to be pretty good tail material. There's a little bit up in the main area that's not real good, but it makes good mosquitoes or bodies of the long, hollow hair that's up in the mane of the moose.
But when we tie for a shop, we tie with the elk or,
When we tie for a shop, it's every shop has their own thing. I as an example, when we tied for Dave Corcoran at the River's Edge in Bozeman, he wanted elk on all of it. So we did. We put elk tail, elk on everything.
and more than one piece of elk.
With his, we had to tie it with 3 pieces of hair. And other ones, we tie it with a tail, and you just tie on another bundle, pull it forward, push it tight, stand up the wings, and you're done. That's why we wrote the Humpy book. By the way, it's free at btsflyfishing.com. Go there, download it. I think it's a dozen chapters, a dozen ways to tie a humpy. And we're going to see another one that's not in the book in a few minutes here, unless there's questions that we need to answer.
You can also get hard copy for $19.99, is it?
Hey, you look, good for you, Mike. Good.
Well, I'm not trying to sell your stuff, but if you don't like reading it off a computer and you like actually thumbing through a book, the book is available too. I wanted to ask, it seems like red and yellow are probably the two most common Humpy styles or whatever. Do you ever do like a Humpy Adams Humpy, or do you ever do many different colors of Humpy, or just pretty much red and yellow?
All the time, the red and the yellow is what's the fly shop want the most. Yellow for me is a more favorite, no, is a favorite color over the red. I like gray, the Adams version. But I'm gonna tell you, here in Idaho, if you're fishing any of the streams in central Idaho, any of the forks of the salmon, and there must be about 10, 12 forks of the Salmon River up there. If you're not fishing chartreuse, you're not fishing. And that's so the humpies that we fish in the Salmon River drainages are almost always, we start out with chartreuse and then we go wherever we have to based on light conditions and all that kind of stuff.
And the
Speaking of
LaFontaine theory of attraction.
And LaFontaine theory of attraction is very important. And yes, we follow it pretty religiously.
Get to work.
Is it time to go to work? Okay, it sure is. Well, put me back on the vice, Gretch. Let's get this guy out of here. Set him aside.
By the way, the camera work was fantastic on that last fly, all the different angles and everything. I really liked the new studio.
I know that Gretchen was, hey, Gretchen's got it going, I'll tell you. I was looking today, I was setting up for tonight and then for tomorrow night because we don't have another gig tomorrow night. And I was saying, ah, dang, I was looking at a place where I could add a fifth camera, but it didn't work out too good.
What?
So, oh, that's okay, Kat. I already owned the camera. I didn't have to buy another camera. Let's see, what am I going to start with? Okay, this one, even though it's got a chartreuse body, by the way, that's a Central Idaho fly. This one, we're going to have to deal with material creep just a little bit different. And we're going to start by coming almost up to this point right here. And that's where we're going to start our tail material. You'll see why here in a moment. And I don't really care about material creep. And I'll show you why here in a minute. So I'll just take it back almost to the beginning. Let's trim off that. And we'll go over and get a bundle of moose. Pull that up here. And we'll get back to the, in fact, why don't you go to the offside camera, Gretch? 3. Yeah, we can see the little bit where we run this up and down like that. And you can start to see those fibers start to work their way out. Now, I'm not going to go any further because what happens is they just keep working their way out and they stick it out about this far out in front. And I don't want them going all over the camera. So I'll pop off camera for just a moment and clean them out over the bin. All right, and now we're back. Now I'll get this handy dandy, wonderful 40-year-old hair stacker out. I had a guy who was last year, a year before, I can't remember which, offered me, I think it was $100 for my hair stacker. And I said, well,
I
no,
know where there's some more. I could auction them off.
I doubt it. If anybody has any sense at all, they'll get one of these. In fact, I haven't even got any here. Gretchen's the one that's got the hair stacker. Why don't you grab it there, Gretchen? I'll show them. These are the ones we sell. They're made out of brass. They're nice, heavy duty things that do a good job. And anyway, I'll get back to tying flies. I get to yakking away here and forget what we're doing.
I could make a little extra money.
Yeah, you sure could. All right, now I'm gonna tie my tail material in.
24 times 100.
And remember, the length of the tail is equal to the length of the hook shank. Set in place, drop down on the side of the hook, come up and over, and it just rolls it in place.
A little hint about that moose when you're teaching somebody to work with hair, a moose tail is really easy tying too. It's a good one to start people out with.
All right, now I'm going to work my way back, and then I'm just going to stop here so it's out of the way. Because what I want to do now is cut a severe slope on this. So I pull it forward so that I can really taper this towards the hook eye. Seems counterintuitive after we talked about all the material creep, but you'll see what we got going here in just a moment. I'm building that underbody. The importance of the underbody on any fly. A good looking fly starts with a good underbody. It ain't the other way around. The good looking fly just happens. I see so many people cut off a tail at the back, and then they cover it up with dubbing and it looks good, but when it gets wet, you have a big knob there, and that's not so good. Let's get back here to about right there. Now what I've done here is I have a piece of 2 millimeter foam.
But by the way, that's about the halfway of the shank. That's where your thread is.
Yeah, it's hanging there.
Okay.
You'll see why here in just a moment. And I've cut this strip so that it's equal in width to a hook one size smaller than the one I'm tying. You can pick out your own dimensions that you want to do, but I find that works pretty good. Now I can leave this blunt like that, but it's a little easier if I'll just nick off the sides a bit, kind of sharpen it up just a bit. Not a lot, just so that there's not quite so much bulk when I tie in there. Because I want to tie in like that. And turn it over so you can see what I'm doing there. And now I'm just going to start wrapping my body going towards the back. And I'm really having to jam the thread tied up against that. See how it's kind of puffing that up? Well, I'm actually collapsing the floatability, if you will, of the part that I'm tying to the hook. But foam has a tendency to slip around the hook, so you really bind it in place, and then the flotation is going to come from the part that's exposed. Keep checking so I don't stop wrapping before I get to the back of the hook. Whoops, snagged the floss. That's not good, but I might be able to salvage it before it breaks. Okay, looks like that's going to be fine. Now, what I'm going to do is something that I hadn't planned on doing, but I'm going to come forward like this, double back over, and get rid of that frayed bad piece of floss that I just created for myself by nicking the point. Now I'm going to bring in a surprise material, a secret material. This is going to be a royal humpy type of a fly, and a royal wolf, a royal humpy, whatever, whether you're doing with poly yarn or with hair, we always tie on the white wings with white thread. Nothing looks worse in our estimation than a really nice looking royal wolf tied with red thread and red crisscrosses between the wings. We are going to attach our thread. I grabbed the wrong thread here. I need white thread, and that was clear. There we go. Here's the white. All right. We're just going to wrap in to our wing mount position, which is right about there. And I'm not quite sure. I better measure it. Well, what's the measurement? Well, let's grab one of these hooks. Okay, I want the wing to be back just a little bit further. There we go. And you notice I just used the gap of the hook. Now, let me reach over and grab my poly yarn. I just got a chunk that I pulled off the skein. and I've already combed it out. And what I really don't need is all of this is way too much. This is probably enough for about, this is a size 8 fly that I'm tying. It's probably enough for a 4. So what I'm going to do is take my bodkin and get rid of some of it. I'll set that one aside. And I'm not putting my fingers in water. You can figure out what I'm doing to moisten them, and we'll just go from there. What I'm doing now is just moistening the material a little bit so I can tie it on the hook. And I'll go the other direction. Oop. Okay, that's looking pretty good. You know, crisscross a couple more times. Now I'm going to crisscross over, pulling those wings up into position so that we have a divided wing that looks kind of like,
So what you're
Yes.
doing is putting pressure kind of on the front part of that.
Yep.
And
all I did is keeps it from, it was laying flat across the hook, and I had to just kind of put some pressure on the sides of the bundles, if you will, to get them to come up in the V shape like you see right there. Now, I want to cut these to length, and remember, we pull them up, we relax to cut them off. There we go. Now I'm going to tie off my white thread. We'll just come back over that here in a minute. And I'm going to wrap my floss body back forward. Notice that I left my floss here at the back of the fly, so it was out of the way. I didn't have to cut it off the hook. I just put it back out of my way, and I'll just wrap forward almost to the tie-in point, but not quite. And I'll pull my hump over. And this doesn't, Mike, you don't have to worry about pushing on it there. You can if you want. I've done it so much, I do it by habit. But let's see, I make sure that I get this set just right. Okay. Now here's what I used to do, and I'm going to show you that's why this one is so darn simple to tie. Let me get up here and trim this out of here. You see that? I just cut that off. Now I'm going to come in here and nick the edge here. And nick the edge here. Just kind of. And I used to go in there and wrap over this. Let me move this around so you can see it better. I would wrap over that and try to crush it down. Well, what that does is puts a big bulky underbody on the hackle that's behind the wing, and it doesn't have the same in front. It kind of throws the fly out of whack. Well, we're going to just tie our feather on right in front of this foam stuff. Let me just see if I can just push that back a little bit with my thumbnail. And what we actually have, as you can see, I still got space back there. I just have to wrap the hackle tight up against that. Well, I used to think you couldn't do that. Well, when we were writing the Humpy book, I messed up one day. I wasn't watching what I was doing, and I did that when I was with some pictures, and I said, "Boy, that looks really good." And I've been doing it ever since. Now, what I'm going to do here is here's a leftover hackle from the last fly that we tied. I'll just tie it on. I want you to notice something. When you look down between those wings, you don't see any crisscrosses of red. And it doesn't make any difference we tie with calf tail, poly yarn, whatever the heck. We always tie it on with white, so it seems to magically appear out of a sea of red. Anyway, I've tied one on. I think I want another hackle, so I'll just get it out here and tie it on as well. Now I'm going to wrap 2 hackles, and I still have to fill in that spot on the off side of the wing. But it's not near the problem that it was with the poly. And I want you to notice also that my hackle platform, the part even, it's going to be slightly in front of the hump from the foam, but notice that we have a nice taper from back here all the way forward. We don't have a big wide spot right back here behind those wings. And that's kind of important. Now, I want you to notice also that I didn't take my thread all the way forward. You'll see why here in just a minute. Let's wrap a couple of turns here behind. This is what I didn't know for years and years, is that you can wrap. I used to think, well, that was all jammed up tight against those wings and you couldn't wrap the hackle in there. Well, actually you can. Now I'm going to wrap my first turn in front, and I want you to notice how I'm pulling back so really hard so that I get that jammed up against those wings. Now I'm going to take another turn behind, and then I'm just going to go ahead and wrap forward. And we get up to almost to the eye, but not. We never tie off when we do a 2 hackle application. You never tie them both off on top of each other. Now I'll notice that we'll get back here again. Notice that I've tied it off. I still have some space left in front, and I'm going to move my thread in front. And in fact, I want you to notice I have not changed from floss to thread. Whoops, sorry. Didn't mean to knock that camera around. And I've done that on purpose because it is possible to do a really good job on your hackle. If you stagger the tie off, you won't end up with a big head. So I'm cutting this one off. Let me get over here so you can maybe see it a little bit better. I'm cutting that off, and it's back away from the eye a little bit. I also want you to notice I'm not cutting it real close to the hook. Why? I'm going to have a couple of turns of hackle in front of it. So that stub up there isn't going to do anything but make the fly more durable. Now I'll come along with my next hackle, 2 turns, and I don't have to worry about jamming it tight up against the front of the wing because I've already done that. And I can just come forward all the way to the front, in front of that last hackle. And we'll take one more turn. Less turns now to do. Because I'm using floss. And I'm just going to pull this back here and let it hang here for a minute while I trim away my waist. Prepare to do a whip finish. I've got a loose bobbin here. Darn thing doesn't want to hold the thread there. There we go. Right. Get the whip finish tool. Whip finishes always start at the back of the head and work their way forward. Now, if I was tying these for a shop or anywhere else other than teaching you all, I would have switched to thread and finish with thread. But even at that rate, tying off with with a floss head. It's not a bad head. And it's all done with floss, and that is a good place where I could have had a major failure. But let's take a look at the fly. Take a look at our divided wings. See how that hackle is? And notice how that trimmed off piece of foam doesn't cause the hackle not to lay in there at all. In fact, it kind of holds it in place pretty nice, doesn't it? And anyway, and that's that. And now it's time for questions again. No questions. Oh dear.
They all went away.
They went away.
I'd like to make a quick comment. I think the doubling back on the floss to repair nicking it on the point of the hook.
Yeah.
I think that was an outstanding tip. That right there. I've
Was
tried
worth
to
the
wrap
price of
over it so
admission.
many times, and you got fuzz everywhere. And I think that's an outstanding tip. I really like that.
Well,
Yeah,
well, good. It's just one of those things that you stumble on, and we've been doing it for years. Didn't even realize it was a tip. I just, I messed up, so I fixed it.
You dazzled our vets here, Al, with that one.
I'm sorry.
You
What?
dazzled the vets here with that one. They thought that was the neatest thing since sliced bread.
Ah, good.
That's a beautiful fly, and with that foam, and as heavily hackled as that is, you do a heavy hackle better than anyone I've ever seen. That's amazing.
You haven't seen Gretchen. She's better than me. I kind of sweat bullets every time I have to sit down and do this, because I can't tell you the number of thousands and thousands of flies that we tied, and we'd go sometimes several winters when we were doing our commercial orders, and I tied the bodies and the wings on, hand them to Gretchen. She'd put on the hackle, and we'd go through the whole doggone year and never tie a complete fly. Just unless we were just throwing something together to put into our own fly boxes.
And
But
I sweat bullets when I have to do a humpy because
Yeah.
I haven't done that many of them.
yeah, and I did all the humpies. I would tie the humpy and the hair ones, because that's what all the fly shops wanted, and then hand it to her. She'd divide the wings and put on the hackle. But anyway, that's
I have a quick question, and be careful how you answer this.
okay.
Who ties the best wolf style fly?
I agree.
Because I may ask you to do that sometime in the future.
You want him to do it. He's really good at wolves.
What we ought to do is put together a program, and we'll do something like a grizzly wolf or a gray body wolf of some type, and then we'll turn right around and tie the same fly as a comparadun with the same body and everything. Slightly different way that you handle stuff, but yeah, be a really good presentation, and the kind of thing that we can crank out in an hour pretty easy.
Right.
And he does a better comparadun too.
Well, a comparadun, and quite frankly, a comparadun and a wolf is the same fly. You don't divide the wings on the comparadun.
But I do like to tie royal wolves. I tie a lot.
She
of-
does a
I-
beautiful
I
royal
like, I
wolf.
like a royal wolf. Yeah.
That's
I
why I
think-
asked you both, because I've seen her do the royal wolf you've has some YouTube videos of you doing it.
Yeah. I just, when I'm frustrated or, I don't know, want to do something to kind of get my mind slowed down, I just sit and tie a royal wolf.
Yep, we're sick people. We're going to have announcement tomorrow on Fly Tying Friday. David Buckner is the presenter, and then we're going to have a tip on wing cases for nymphs, and then we'll make an announcement, because next week is just before Halloween, and we're not going to have a weekly tip. We're going to show Halloween flies. So anybody that wants to tie a wild looking fly, they can sure do it. It's when I received that suggestion, I thought it was a great idea, because there's a fly that we fish here in Idaho, probably all over the country. It's called the Halloween, and all it is the woolly bugger with a black with a body that has orange in the middle. You know, it's tied the same as a royal wolf. Black, orange, black is the way the body is, just like a royal wolf. It's peacock, red peacock. Well, I'm surprised we don't. Is there anything here that we need to?
Nope, there's nothing.
Okay, well, anyway, if you're interested in the materials that we used here and you don't have them, if you'll go into the chat, we posted links to where you can get that. It's they're Amazon links, and I looked around and they were the cheapest place. And in fact, some of the stuff we recommended you go out and find it without going online, because you'll just do better at your local store. As an example, we gave some information on equipment for Zoom, and we get a lot of questions on that. Equipment for doing your Zoom studios and so forth, and your background material. Amazon's got a good price on it. The only thing is they want to sell you 15 sheets of this stuff, and it's a per unit price is really good, but it's, what do you need 15 pieces of foam that's, 2 foot by 3 foot? If you don't. So you go to a place like Hobby Lobby and buy one sheet for $4, $5, $6, whatever it is.
I bought my green and gray foam core at I believe it was Hobby Lobby or Michael's for
They both got it. Yeah.
it was just one sheet, and it's worked great for me. So
Yeah, we managed with the setup we've got here. We have well, as you can see, we've got a background behind our materials and a background behind the fly itself. And that's then we have a couple other little backgrounds that we do. Well, I've got one right here.
Here's this one. I got this. Oh,
Yeah, we both have these for showing flies to people, One of the things about our new Zoom studio is we stopped using the laptop camera, and we're actually the laptop camera is right there. And the camera we're using is way the heck in behind it. And it's thanks to Jack Gillis. It's a Sony RX100 Model 3. Does a good job, and we're real pleased with it.
we don't have a camera there anymore.
Yeah, it's there. I just forgot to turn it on because we weren't going to be using it.
Oh, okay.
But anything else, guys? Well, maybe we can chat for a bit, but what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to remove my spotlight, and I'm going to
Here's Priscilla. Hi,
stop.
Priscilla.
I'm going to stop the recording, and we're going to go on Facebook and Facebook Live, stop the live stream. Now it's just us talking. You're not going out to the world again. So it's safe to say stuff,
well, I wish I would have done this before you left, but I was a little bit late on the uptake. But I just really want to thank you for the presentation tonight. It was great.
Our pleasure. And hey, we'll have to get together and we'll do that Humpy for you. Not the Humpy, the wolf. The wolf and the comparadon. That makes a good presentation because each one has a couple of little things different about them.